Did you ever wonder? I do. Did you ever wonder why the sun always rises, but the stars never fall? Why dry land is never satisfied by water? And why fire never says enough?
The wonder of locusts and honey today. So, you may know that these were the foods of John the Baptist, and I've been studying this whole idea of witnessing, and we've certainly talked about nostrils, and we've talked about all these different things that create a wave, and that idea of what they heaped up in Gilead. That idea is actually that of a wave, and waves create big change. And obviously that's what John the Baptist was to do. He came very specifically with this objective, which was to be a witness. And so what does locusts and honey have to do with that? Why would they give us that detail? And clearly, when we were talked about, the neat thing about having two witnesses is they provide lots of depth of perception. And so details like that, especially intimate details, like what somebody eats, specifically locusts, it's kind of strange. Honey, okay, most people I know eat honey, and it's a wonderful thing, but why would they give us that detail? And what is that detail about? I'm sure you wonder with me. And so, I've been studying a lot about the first letter in the word witness. We've talked a lot about the ayin, and the second letter is a dalet, and we may have talked about that a bit yesterday, meaning a dalet is a doorway of humility, right? And so you got to admit that if you met somebody and all they ate was locusts and honey, clearly whatever they were doing, it wasn't about them. In other words, they aren't pampering themselves, obviously, and would have to be a fairly humble individual to have that be their diet, or they must feel that they're eating for God rather than eating for themselves. And you can't help but note that, and it would, if it were me and I knew that that's what this person ate, and I knew how they dressed. I had a good friend tell me, just today that that would be the thing you would say about John the Baptist, is that this is clearly not about him, right? Because, he's not dressed in the latest stuff, and he's certainly not eating high on the hog, so to speak, which wouldn't be kosher, obviously. But all these things point to the fact that he would be a great witness. But there's also another message behind the locusts and honey that I think can't be missed. And we've talked about this spectrum, right, of right to left, and how things provide depth of perception. Well, there's a big gap between the two of locusts and honey, and that would be that locusts biblically almost always point to judgment, right? It will come that way in the end. There's clearly a plague of locusts, and it certainly happened in Egypt that there was a plague of locusts. And so here you have this judgment, but honey is definitely clearly the blessing, right? And so when you think about the words that John shared with people, were they to follow his instruction, they would get the honey. But unfortunately, those who wouldn't follow it certainly faced one horrible judgment. And that's kind of how that works. There is a spectrum, and if you go to the left, it's one thing, and if you go to the right, it's another, and you're going to choose. And in his case, the spectrum was quite wide. And so, again, when you take this into context, you go, well, this gave this man great credibility. And again, what was his main job description according to what we read here in John chapter 1? It says he came to be a witness. Well, what's the first most important thing you want when you're listening to a witness? You want to know that they're speaking the truth and that they have no filter. In other words, that they're not saying this in order to manipulate you. They're not saying this in order to make them look good. They're not saying this for a selfish reason, but they're saying this in order to provide a picture of what the truth is, of what they actually witnessed. And if anybody witnessed Christ, obviously that would be John the Baptist. And so all that points to, when I think about it, what's my story, right? Is my diet point to my humility? Or when people see my diet, do they think that that's somebody that's a glutton, Or the way I dress, is that point to God, or does that point to me? And again, those are questions that, sometimes you don't want to show up at church underdressed because are you not respecting God, or you don't want to show up to church overdressed. And so it just points to that, like, man, without you, I can do nothing, Lord, right? It points to, man, in order to be a good witness, I need to be checking in all the time because I don't know what the right thing is to wear in given situations is. I don't know what the right thing to eat is in certain situations. But what's cool about John is he clearly had gotten that information directly from his best friend, right? And so as we think about all the aspects of our life, when people sum it up and they look, with their two eyewitnesses, with their two ear witnesses, with their nose, their two nostril witnesses, and with their two hand witnesses, and with their taste, are they tasting and seeing that what I say is good and is of the Lord, or are they tasting and seeing, wow, this is suspect information? Which, again, if you're going to create a wave of influence, which is obviously what a witness is to do, then it's going to take a great deal of help from God. Thanks for listening.
Do you ever wonder?